Hello and welcome to ParticularPixels. I'm Xiaoling and this is Rain World. Rain World is an exploration-based platformer where you play as a slug cat in search of his family. The first thing you'll notice when you load up the game is probably the great aesthetic, followed by its physics-based animation, which creates for some really believable creature animation. When you start the game, you're essentially just going to be thrown in, and the game's going to wait for you to discover things for yourself. There's very little explanation of what's actually going on, and there's no actual tutorial that teaches you how to move, and that's about it. And for the most part, I understand the minimalist approach that they've taken. This is the kind of game where it's best discovered rather than explained, but at times I think that the lack of explanation of some of the game systems will be a little bit frustrating for some people and not to everybody's liking. The game consists of around 1,600 rooms spread across the various biomes in the game. Each room has a unique layout consisting of platforms, poles, water and structures that you'll have to navigate through to get to the next room. There are also two types of tunnels in each room. The one whose entrance is indicated by an arrow will lead you to another location in the same room, and there are ones indicated by 3 stripes which will lead you into the next room. Add in an ecosystem on top of that and you're going to have various forms of wildlife that wander around the rooms just as you do. These creatures have minds of their own, they're also trying to eat, and they're also trying to avoid the rain that comes at the end of the day. And of course the different biomes have different sorts of wildlife. Some will be more aggressive and others not so much. If you are of course attacking a certain type of creature all the time, they will learn from this behavior and change the way they react towards you. And as a slug cat, you're definitely not at the top of the food chain. So many of these creatures will be trying to eat you because, lunch. There are some smaller creatures in the game as well as fruit that you can eat, which fall below you on the food chain. Now this leads me to the next mechanic in the game, which is hibernation. Each day only lasts for a certain amount of time. Once the timer runs out, it's going to start to rain. The rain will eventually get stronger and stronger and stronger, and the screen's going to start shaking. And if you're outside at the end of this, you will die. So you might be wondering, why not just go underground into one of the caves, into one of the caverns? And the reason is because when the rain reaches its full strength, it will flood all the underground caverns and caves as well, and you will die. So the only way to avoid this is to find specific locations designated as hibernation spots. These allow you to sleep, start a new day, and also act as save locations in the game. So if you die, you'll restart at the last hibernation spot that you visited. But in order to use these hibernation spots, you're going to need to eat. There are 8 hunger slots in total. I think it was 8. 4 of these need to be filled in order for you to hibernate, and any other food that you have eaten will carry over to the next day, saving you the need to have to go get that much food for the next day. So as each day starts, your priority is going to be to get enough food so that you can hibernate if you manage to find a hibernation spot, and then begin your exploration adventure in order to try and find the next hibernation spot. The final mechanic is a survival counter of sorts. Each day that passes without you dying increases the level of the survival counter. Each of the levels of the survival counter have a certain icon associated with it. And the reason this is important is because you're going to come across certain locations of the game that are locked off. And these locked areas have symbols next to them, so you'll have to match the symbols on the lock to the symbols which falls into the amount of days survived. And once you've matched them up, the area will open, allowing you new access, or at least allowing you access to new sections of the game. You can also pick up sticks that you will throw either at monsters or creatures to dissuade them from attacking you, and if you throw enough in some cases you can actually kill some of the creatures. Or you can use them as points. You can throw them into the wall and you can use it as a point to climb up onto and then hop onto other stuff. And in certain screens this is absolutely necessary. There are stones as well that you can throw as distractions or as weapons at some of the creatures. There are also a number of plants that you can pick up. For example, one that slows down time, or one that creates a bubble around your survival counter so that you don't lose survival level once you die, basically acting as some kind of a buffer. The thing is though, you can only carry 2 things at a time in the game. So you can carry 2 sticks or 2 stones. You can only ever carry 2 things at a time. You don't have an inventory on the game, so you've got to pick up stuff planning ahead, what's going to be coming in screens that you will be heading into. All of this of course sounds like a pretty compelling experience, discovering and exploration, learning the creature's behavior, learning the ecosystem, and exploring the interesting locations that are presented in the game and eating to survive. And it is, for a while. But unfortunately, it starts to get pretty repetitive. And that's because the game is pretty difficult and you'll be dying a lot. Now, this is not inherently itself a problem, but the fact that it causes you to have to replay sections over and over and over, it turns into a game of trial and error. As you progress further into the game, you are going to discover a screen, so you might have to play through certain sections that you've played through several times already just to discover a new room. But then in the new room, you have to work out how to beat the new room. You might get eaten because of some new creature you found, or you might die because, time ran out and the rain starts and you haven't found a new save spot. You don't have enough food to save, or you are too far away from your previous save spot to go back all the way there and save it. So then you end up dying and then you end up having to replay the whole section again. And I'd also like to say that the save spots are pretty far apart. So another part of the trial and error is just exploring until you find one, and then you found it but you might die just beforehand, then you have to go there all again just so you can get there to save it. But don't get me wrong, I like the idea of the ecosystem in the game. I think it can be exhilarating to have to avoid predators in the game, and it adds a little bit of variety, I suppose, in that each of the screens or rooms is never going to be the same, because you never know what kind of creatures are going to make their way in there and start wandering around. But don't get me wrong, I like the idea of the ecosystem. I think it can be quite exhilarating to have to avoid some of the predators in the game in order to outsmart them. It feels pretty fluid, especially with the physics-based animation in the game. I did, however, feel that the eating mechanic was a little bit shallow, as it's basically just a box to tick so that you can save the game. You start the day, you go to a place you know where there's food, like bats or fruit, you eat them all, up your meter, and then go and explore and inevitably die at some point. But as I said earlier, the problem is that because you die so much and have to replay sections so often, it starts to feel repetitive. It's the same rooms over and over, and this is only complicated by the fact that some random creature is going to show up, which in some cases is going to slow your progress down, since they may wander into the area that you want to go into, which means they're going to be in the room that you are headed toward, which means that they're going to continually be a thorn in your side while you try to explore. This wouldn't inherently be an issue because of the monster adding some variety into the room sections, but since you've very likely played these rooms multiple times already, you probably just want to get a little bit further and not have to replay the same room over again. I really wanted to like this game since I started following it, but unfortunately I found myself losing interest more and more as I played through the game because of me constantly having to replay sections that I'd already played. The ecosystem is interesting. I think that's a highlight of the game. Finding new life forms and dangerous plants are always very cool the first time you find them, but not so cool the nth time that you have to negotiate and deal with them. The controls are fine for the most part, although I will say that they were not as responsive or as accurate as I would have liked. They did the job, but at the same time there were many situations that I fell off ledges because the movement wasn't as precise as I've liked, which again added to the annoyance, since it caused me to end up in situations where I either got killed by a monster, fell off a ledge, etc, 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 and had to restart yet again. Now, I don't mind difficult games. In fact, I enjoy challenging games, but the gameplay loop that I'm forced to replay has to be engaging enough and enjoyable enough for me to continually try to play through those sections. And unfortunately, in Rain World, it's just not. Well, not for me, at least. Now, that's not to say that Rain World is a bad game, but it's for sure not going to be for everyone. Don't be fooled by the amazing art and the awesome physics-based animation. The game is difficult, progress is going to be slow. So if you don't mind replaying sections of the game over and over, and you like the aesthetic of the game, and you like the feeling of exploration and discovering and learning about this ecosystem, you will probably enjoy Rain World. But honestly, for everybody else who has an interest in the game, I'd recommend that you wait for a sale at least. Anyway guys, I hope that you've enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the section below. As usual, like, subscribe, dislike, up to you. Thanks for watching. I've been Xiaoling. Until next time.